So I'm just going to pull some stuff up here real quick. Most of you have seen this before, just some outline on us. And just to talk to you a little bit about what's going on with us and what's going on with the industry in general. We are in the business of supporting injury victims, however they might happen to get injured. Typically, there are third parties that are responsible for their injuries if they're in an accident, or they get poisoned, or they fall down, or they get, sued unjustly. Hang on one second. I'm gonna I'm just gonna mute you out. Somebody's got. Okay. Hang on one second. Okay, just got a lot quieter. Hi, Kelly.
Hi.
All right, let's go back. So I'm not gonna belabor. Today we're going to be talking about law firms primarily, and we will have Chandon in from his law firm to talk a little bit about the state of personal injury. As I was mentioning before, we have tremendous connections with the leaders in so many people in the industry, in the injury industry, including mass tort, medical malpractice. We have a very prominent class action attorney that works with our firm, and we have the top brain injury and mold attorneys.
So I'm gonna put approved up to 10,000, Jen. Approved up to 10K COGS, which is cost of goods. COGS is cost of goods and service.
Sorry, Ashley, I could hear you. Okay.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. It's all right. Hi, Ashley. So Ashley's with the group that's responsible for the expert pays. We're going to talk about that in a minute. She's actually an attorney as well. Thank you for showing up, because Chandon will be here. So there's three parts to an injury case. There's the victim, and if they need treatment, there are doctors and there are lawyers, and we support all three of these and everybody affiliated with them. That's our business. And these are our spheres of business: medical offices, injury victims. We do partnerships with massive companies that are in the injury space. And the bottom line is we're trying to figure out, how do we get our product out there? I had a massive telephone call with my portfolio manager on Friday. We've got all this money, and he said to me, Mitch, what do we have to do to bring in the large portfolios? How do we bring in the really big business, the companies, the hospitals that really need it, the law firms that really need it? And so we did a lot of brainstorming about this over the weekend, and you guys ask me this all the time. And it's easy to get caught in a trap, dealing with small offices and small, we want to help everybody we can. We're a mission-based company. Our goal is to support an injury victim any way that we can. By the same token, we also have to get our business to the people that need it the most. And, the bottom line is, do they need it and want it, right? This is like anything else. If they feel like they have absolutely no need for any of our services, there's no potential way to sell them. However, what's the next question? So if you don't need it, who do you know who does, right? Do any of your injury victims need the money? Are there suppliers that are in trouble? Are there doctors you work with that want to expand their practices? We've got money to purchase practices, to do lines of credit, to help companies that are providing products to injury victims. We have money for all of this stuff. And I want to encourage you not to be shy. Our mission is to help injury victims. So we shouldn't really feel any hesitancy to reach out to these people, because we're trying to help them. And we don't charge anything for our consultation services anyway, right? So tremendous untapped market. Our partners actually have more than a couple of $1 billion to put on the street. They showed me their financials the other day, and it was quite alarming how much there's a lot of money and capital available to do this. And here are some of the really interesting types of companies and potential clients that we work with. And last time you were here, we spoke about business brokers because they broker healthcare businesses. People that want to buy and sell a practice, they may not have the cash. They might not have sparkling credit. They might not have a banking relationship. None of that's required to finance accounts receivable. Accounts receivable is financeable on its own, assuming that the office is not, it doesn't have some striking legal problem that would prevent an insurance company from settling or paying a case. Attorneys need expert costs paid. Typically, experts ask for payment out of their pockets. We alleviate that by finding experts for them and for financing the experts. So this is a very untapped market for us. I know a few of you have mentioned to me that you wanted to go to the legal profession and say, hey guys, if you're going to trial or you need experts, we can help cover those expenses for you. Very untapped market. Billing companies have tremendous books of, if somebody's already got their billing, chances are that they are interested in collecting money. And a lot of them don't know what to do with work comp and personal injury cases. They bill it, but they don't really have an idea. If it takes a long time, it takes a long time, especially personal injury cases. So we alleviate that problem because we can advance money to those medical providers that are working with billing companies, and we'll pay the billing company as an affiliate, as a partner of our company. We'll pay them to divert that business to us so that we can get that capital to the people who need it. DME, this stands for durable medical equipment. So medical equipment companies typically serve the injury industry. People are home, they're getting home health care, the hospital bed, a wheelchair, types of therapy devices are sent to the home. And there are companies that are nationwide in scope. And I've spoken to 4 or 5 of them in the last 2 weeks. Some of these companies are actually working with doctors, waiting to get paid. They've got very high accounts receivable. We can definitely help them. And a lot of them are nationwide. And our company is a nationwide company. Surgeons, spinal surgeons, orthopedic surgeons charge a lot of money. They don't like to wait to get paid, but if they don't have a source of capital to pay them, then they have to wait for the money. And then ancillary providers are just other types of providers that we don't know about that are providing service. Translation service, I have one of those, believe it or not. So they work in the litigation side. Somebody that does accident reconstruction. Psychologists have to do reports on the status of somebody's psychological being. So these are all types of potential markets for you to think about when you think about, how do I get to a market that we can get our capital out to so we can all participate? It requires a little creativity. Dr. Tony is with us here today. He actually represents a large group of doctors in the thousands, and he is a partner with our company. He runs an educational consortium focused on personal injury, and he's kind enough to partner up with us to make our service available to his doctors and his doctors available to us as well. So that's an example. There aren't a lot like him, but they're out there. So cases are settling because it's too expensive to litigate. A lot of cases, the attorney and the client cannot wait for the case to settle, and they have to take a very low amount because they don't have the wherewithal to stick with it until the litigation can continue. We alleviate that problem by providing capital to the lawyer, the doctor, the expert, and anything else that's required. Today we're talking about law offices, and Chandon will be here in a minute. And again, here it is, cases are settling. So we do advances on litigation costs. We could provide lines of credit to lawyers. We can pay for their expert services. We can give them professional loans. And when we talk about case types, we're not just talking about personal injury. We're also talking about other types of injury. They might be economic injuries. They might be somebody that a company is suing another company. They've been injured financially, and we work with those types of cases as well. Medical malpractice, when someone's injured in a hospital setting. A mass tort might be a product liability. Somebody was poisoned or something happened to them because of something that they came in contact with. And those companies typically either are insured or have the products, right? Help for law firms. So most of our funding is non-recourse, meaning if we lend money, the law firm doesn't have to pay it back. And that includes a lot of our services, but also in the case of inheritance or probate, we also do advance money towards other types of legal cases when it's needed. I don't do a lot of them, but they do come up, and we don't turn them away. Work comp, probate, and lawsuits. So Chandon's going to be here in a minute to talk about Spartacus Law Firm. They are in Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm going to close this for 1 second here. And he's not here yet. So before Chandon gets here, I want to go out to you guys and I want to see from you what kind of an experience you're having. Let me start with you. Hey, Bruce. Bruce is busy.
Hello?
Okay, hi, Bruce. And I'm going to put Kelly on the line too.
You have a question?
No, that's okay. I'll get back to you in a second. I was going to talk to you a little bit about practice purchase, but I'm going to just bring Kelly. Can you unmute for a minute? Hi, Kelly.
Hi there.
Kelly's our Director of Client Services. She's responsible for making sure that our clients are happy and they get what they need from us. And as we're growing, it's important for us to have all the support we need. How are you?
I'm good.
How are they treating you?
Oh, I'm so thankful to be a part of this team. It's phenomenal. It's been a challenging week, but again, I'm excited. And I'm here. So if I'm learning too, right? So I'm new in this position, new with Vitality Health, but I'm fully invested and I believe in this. So I'm really excited for the opportunities to come for everyone.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Hey, Amir, are you on? Can you jump in for a second? Did I lose you, Amir? There he is.
Hey, how you doing?
Very good. So let me introduce everybody to Amir Towns. He's a partner with us, and Amir is the principal party that does medical billing for us, and has a tremendous medical billing organization. And I'm getting asked for this a lot, by the way, Amir, since I brought this up. Can you tell us a little bit about your operation and about medical billing in general?
Yeah. So we have an offshore team of about 150 guys. We currently work with different labs, DME companies, urgent cares, home health. We do credentialing, anything you could think of, we have done it.
What about what happens when you come across, or do you come across personal injury and work comp?
We haven't came across it much lately, but we have in the past.
Okay, right. Well, obviously, I want you to send that to me, but I just thought I would ask you as long as you're here.
Yeah, definitely.
But what Amir's not telling you is other billing companies go to him to fix their problems. This is the guy. He's very humble. But, that's what, because his people can make sure that the companies are going to get paid. And we participate. This is our billing arm. And we participate with Amir. We, on an ongoing basis, we have clients, hospitals, whoever. We spoke to someone last week that was waiting. He's just billing Blue Cross Blue Shield. It's taking him 6 to 12 months to get paid, which is insane.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Cut that down to 3 to 4 months. So he more than anything that the client gets charged, more than pays for itself. All of our services are designed like that. They're designed so that they really pay for themselves by increasing somebody's collection, even if we if we charge them, 5 or 10%, then we improve their collections by 20. It's in there. There's the benefit there. So I appreciate you showing up today, Amir. Hey, Dr. Tony, can you jump in for a second? I want to introduce you as well.
Hey,
Hi,
what's
Doc.
going on, gang?
How are you?
Good. St. Louis, Missouri's in the house. 39 years
St. Louis.
personal injury. Yeah, me and Mitchell came across each other on LinkedIn, connected with them, and started out with 6 personal injury doctors. I've taught personal injury procedures for the last 37 years all over the USA. Of course, COVID shut down a lot of traveling, so I decided to put a small personal injury doctors group from 6. We're at 3,800 members and growing. So I said, these guys and gals need something like this service. And so we bring a lot of services to their practices. And we're really about a month and a half new to this with Mitchell. So we did get a few over there already. I know there's been a couple questions, Mitch, real quick. What's the minimum accounts receivables you need? Because a lot of these doctors aren't as great as big as hospitals and MRI centers. Maybe you can help me real quick with that number, and then we can go forth, try to market a little bit more. There's plenty of doctors that need this stuff because they all do personal injury and waiting for years and years for their accounts receivables.
Thanks, Doc. Oh, I appreciate that. It's harder to do a small one than it is to do a large one. We're
Yes.
finding that. I mean, my heart is open to them, but the docs that are bringing me 50, and so, we had a problem with a 70, 50, or $60,000 portfolio was too small for us. In some parts of the country where we're not very active, under 100,000, I think is a problem for us. It's like there's no way for us to help them and help us at the same time.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I would
Well,
say,
we're glad we're on board. I mean, the services are there for them, so we'll just keep searching and making sure they can get tagged with your group there and team, and appreciate all of you on that team, and looking forward to working with y'all.
thank you, Doc. You're the best. I really appreciate it. I'm going to try to grab Ashley. Hey, Ashley, are you available? No, Ashley, if you're busy, you're here in spirit. She's very, very busy. Okay, that's all right.
Mitch, are you there?
I am. Hi, Ash.
Hi, sorry, I had to step out for a minute. I apologize.
You're fine. You're fine. Now that you're here, Ashley runs our expert pays. She pays for our medical experts for our attorney offices. So happy you showed up today. Can you talk a little bit about what a good expert is, and how anything you want to share with us about experts in general?
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of attorneys are looking for, and I mean, I can mostly speak to the jurisdictions I work in, but they want experts that, timely perform the work and are available, but also have good backgrounds, and aren't going to be easily impeached. Like, that's always an issue. I think it's an increasingly problematic issue. So good vetting of experts is really important. So it's a nice balance between experience doing expert work, but not so much experience that they're easily impeached on cross-examination. So I think those are the things I'm hearing the most from attorneys on what they're looking for.
Are there any types of experts that we don't pay?
That expert pays does not pay for?
Yeah, is there, like, for instance, accident reconstruction guys are okay, and I know we've done some psych work.
Yes, so on the expert pays end, what will, the experts will finance range from even pre-litigation experts that are used on a consulting basis for mediations, or maybe even just to get the demands together to send to the insurance companies or the corporations. And then all the way through liability, causation, and damages experts. So there's not really any experts that are that are off limits. The limitations come in with the value of the case and what makes sense as case costs on the case. Those would be the only limitations on the types of experts.
Okay,
With that said, we do not fund very often in business litigation cases, like breach of contract cases. So those would be unique, but I'm happy to talk to anyone about it. It just is not something we do on a regular basis.
okay. Chandon's here. Hi, Chandon. Oh, he's got to unmute. Hold on. You have to unmute. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you for coming in. Appreciate you. Okay. Hi, Chandon.
Hi, Mitch.
Good.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, everything good?
Okay. Yeah, my sound volume's a little low for whatever reason.
Okay, you sound good to me. So,
Okay.
so everyone, this is Chandon Alexander. He runs Spartacus Law Firm in Las Vegas. Has a variety of experience, and I just wanted to bring him in, introduce him to the team. And Chandon, I was going to just let you take the floor, ask you a little bit about your experience as a lawyer, how you got into personal injury, and quite frankly, why you're so good at it.
Well, thank you, Mitch. You're too kind.
Well, you do. You're the
So,
guy.
so as far as getting into personal injury, if I'm going to be honest, I think I got into it in the way a lot of other attorneys get into it, just sort of by default, right? They tend to be very good cases, hard to come by. But every once in a while you'll get a client, because I have other practice areas, as you know, that has an accident or knows someone that got into an accident. That's how you kind of trip into the area, because you take the case and they're interesting cases. They're interesting because they combine both the medical perspective and the law.
Right. And so what does a good case look like? What is a good personal injury case?
Well, again, to be frank, the first thing you want to look for, obviously, is insurance limits, right? That makes a good case from a legal perspective, because you can have someone with very serious injuries and they're woefully uninsured, and the at-fault driver is uninsured. And, the case will resolve for policy limits, but that doesn't really do much of anything for the injured party. So, you hope initially, obviously, to have your client to have uninsured motorists, and for the other driver to have adequate insurance coverage.
Right. And
And some of the other things, obviously, are injuries. And in terms of values of cases, it certainly helps to have injuries that relate back to a client's work or profession. That's something that's not always acknowledged. Sometimes the focus is just the injury, but if the person is a laborer, or let's even say, and you're very familiar with this area, a significant brain injury, and the person is a professional, a hedge fund manager, or something of that nature, that's going to impact that individual significantly in their practice area.
right. So yeah, and you've worked on some very interesting cases. Can you talk about wrongful death cases? Are they different than personal injury? I know this is something you're heavily into right now.
Sure. They're definitely different, and a lot of people don't realize, that it's the estate that is the claimant, and obviously not the deceased. And so you actually have to set up an estate and a trust for the deceased party. And obviously, wrongful death cases are the most serious of claims, because the person has lost their life. So, to give you an example, I saw, I've got that hotel case right now with Laughlin. I'll talk a little bit about that, where the gentleman fell into the Laughlin River and died. And, the level of security, or at least the procedural safeguards from Laughlin, is abysmal. And I saw just recently a guy, and I was surprised at this. This is not a wrongful death, but just to give an idea of sometimes how significant these jury awards can be, if litigated properly. There was a case here in Nevada, and I forget the casino, but he went in and ordered a beer, and they didn't give him a beer. I guess they were cleaning the machines, and it had chemicals in it. And so he had some throat, injuries. And I guess he was and I'm going to say this wrong, sommelier. How do I say that? Right? He drinks the wines, does the wine tasting. So he said, again, it goes back to what I was saying with a correlation to his profession. And, they took the case to trial. They offered $300,000 as the offer of judgment. The casino did, or the hotel did. Ended up walking away with an $8 million verdict. And so sometimes some of these verdicts, especially in a wrongful death case, and that's why I'm saying it differs, the values are very high, but of course the other side plays pretty hard as well for a whole number of reasons, not just to sort of mitigate the case down, but also to just wear the parties out and, to bill up fees, which is something unfortunately that they do. So they tend to drag a case on a lot longer than it should be dragged out.
Right, and I spoke about that to the team here today, how, a lot of times people have to settle because they can't afford to stay through the litigation.
Right.
That's the purpose of our whole company, really, is
Right.
to support these cases so that people can afford to stay in.
Yeah, that's a significant factor. And, even in auto injury cases where, I've got a couple, and State Farm, as a good example, is lagging behind on accepting liability, which kind of keeps my client from getting their car repaired. They try to, I think, sour the pool between the injury attorney and the potential client. It's saying, hey, I've got my car. From a client's perspective, they've got their car, they've got their vehicle damage. That's their first concern. And the insurance company's dragging their heels on getting it repaired and getting them a rental car. And that kind of falls back on the attorney, right? It makes it seem like they're not doing their job.
Wow.
And so they sour the pool. So there's, I think, a number of tactics that they try to implement to cause friction and delay.
How do you use expert witnesses? What's your like?
Expert witnesses, I think, are extremely important to any case. I think they're highly persuasive to the jury, but more importantly, and I don't know the audience here and how much they know about the law, but there's usually always a motion for summary judgment. And summary judgment means that there's no set of facts that the plaintiff can prove, and judgment should be provided as a matter of law. And so and I did this actually because I've done a little defense work, and I'll flip it on a premises liability case, which is somewhat interesting. So two neighbors, and this one neighbor was extremely litigious. And so he claims that they, left their garbage can out, and the garbage can was where it wasn't supposed to be. And he fell on it, and he got these very significant injuries. And so the neighbors retained me. They didn't want to go through their insurance carrier for whatever reason. And one of the things I did there, and goes back to the expert issue, is I hired a construction and architect expert to say that the way, and I think the plaintiff here was lying, right? I think he was just litigious and was just looking to sue. Because the way he said the garbage can fell because of the high wind, and the winds do get really rowdy here in Las Vegas, but there was just no set of facts that made it plausible. And I had an expert that said that, and had the diagrams, and we measured the wind speed and the weight of the garbage can and a whole number of factors. Things, frankly, I wouldn't have thought about. He did. Now, plaintiff's counsel failed to get a rebuttal expert. And I don't know why, but they lost the case on summary judgment because they didn't have a rebuttal expert. And the court said, yeah, it's plausible. And there's no set of facts that make the plaintiff's claim plausible here. And I think that was actually malpractice on part of the plaintiffs. So just even from the legal perspective, they're very important, because failure to get an expert and losing your case at summary judgment literally falls on the attorney and whether or not there was competent legal advice that was given. And like I said, it is not potentially, but it is a malpractice issue. So experts not only play a role in bolstering your case, but also, from my perspective, keep you out of trouble.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you have bad?
I'd recommend experts in almost every case where, you know, the dollar value justifies it, to bring it in to buttress your case, specifically for a summary judgment motion. You know, a lot of attorneys, they just get a little lazy and they hope the case will settle. But there's discovery cutoffs, right? And so, you know, you can't wait until the last minute to say, oh, wait, we're going to go to trial. I want to get an expert. If the time has passed, and that's what happened in the premises liability case, the time had passed for them to get a rebuttal expert, so they just couldn't. And, you know, that ended up being a failing on their end. So, you know, you got to get experts, you got to get them early, and you got to get them to help you with your case because they can see things that you can't.
Do you have bad faith laws in Vegas?
There are, I wouldn't say that they're great. You know, I moved here from Florida. Florida's got some bad faith laws with teeth. I would say Vegas has got them in spirit, but without teeth.
Because out here in California, how it works is if we ask for limits on insurance and they deny it, we can make an argument bad faith and they take the limits off the policy.
Yeah, the same thing applies here. I think that is fairly universal, but you know, bad faith usually it's usually invoked more in Las Vegas where there's uninsured motorist coverage, and you're dealing with your insurance company directly.
Got it. What's the current time frame? I mean, I know things got really screwed up during COVID, but if somebody came to you, how long is it taking to let's say get a hearing in court?
You're asking, my volume's a little low. Sorry. You're asking how long it takes typically for an injury case to.
Asking for time frame, yeah, like right now,
Yeah,
in general on cases.
I'm finding that they get to maximum medical improvement from the clinic or the physician, typically 6 to 8 months out.
Right, and then, but what about the court process? Timetable in the court process?
In auto accidents, you know, if you file, and generally, you know, you're not filing in the great majority of these cases, but if you have to file, it's going to tack on another 6 to 8 months from the time that your client's gotten MMI. Most of the time, you know, the insurance company will make a reasonable offer after deposition. So they want to take the temperature of your client. If there's some issues with injury, see how they present themselves, see how the injuries affected them, see if they can trip them up.
Yeah, no, just wondering because for a while there we had extraordinary time frames where you couldn't get into a superior court for, I don't know, they were backed up about 2.5 years there for a minute. And we
Some of
always
them can. Yeah. And with the pandemic, things are moving slower, but you can get through discovery and you could take depositions. One of the good things of the pandemic is they're doing a lot of video depositions now. So you can do them from your office. That makes life a little easier.
Right. Plus the parking is cheaper. Any particular comments about working with me and my firm?
Well, I mean, you're great. You're knowledgeable. You're likable, easy to work with. But of course, the most important thing is the knowledge base, and you've got that. So, you know, you've got that broad knowledge of how and what to do in a case, which is unique. So, you know, anything that adds, and I always believe in that team perspective. I try not to do things just on my own because other people are going to see things that you don't. So you're a great resource for that and looking at a case and thinking, hey, let's look at this, or maybe this injury, you know, is something that we should have the client go see a specialist for, because going back to value of case, injuries are also, or not also, they're paramount. So you want to make sure that, you know, the client is being assessed and treated properly and not just relying on you know, the chiro or the treating physician, because sometimes they miss stuff. They meet with a lot of patients and
Right.
they may miss, let's say, like a TMJ analysis or something that adds some value to the case.
Right, yeah.
So you're great at that, Mitch.
For those of you who are here that don't know, I work as a medical expert. I do case evaluations, the only type of patients I see at this point.
But in terms also of retaining fees or getting funding, you've been awesome on that. We've worked on a couple different cases. I mean, I won't give out names, but we had that jail case where the client was in custody and we were still able to get him funding, which that was a small miracle. So you are the guy for funding and being able to fund not just easy cases, but some of the tougher ones.
Thank you, very kind of you. So I'll open up the floor here. Anybody, do you want to say anything else, or should I just let people ask you questions they want to ask?
Yeah, if anybody has any questions.
Don't be shy, folks. This is your chance. It's a busy guy. Wow. Hey, Tony.
Present.
Yeah, I wanted to introduce you to Chandon. This is Dr. Tony. He runs a doctor's service organization for personal injury doctors. Has
Oh,
over
okay, great.
3,000 members. So I wanted to introduce you guys. Tony, do you have docs in Las Vegas too, right?
Yeah, we got them all over. A lot in California, Florida, Texas, Carolinas, just all over. And I don't know if Chandon mentioned, but I know state no fault has a factor in the law. I'm sure he knows that. And if you have the accident in a certain state, that's the laws that pretty much take precedence in how the accident procedures will run with an attorney if you have needed an attorney for that. But
Yeah,
he's right on with everything he mentioned. I mean, most doctors release patients within 6 months to 8 months time, depending on the injury, obviously, if it's a disc or something like that. And then we write it out with a lien and then make sure the attorney has to get the records and health costs. That's usually all of the holdup a lot of times, right, Chandon? You get the medical records, that makes you allow you to go forward to make your demands for the settlement. And then then you got to do your due diligence and try to represent the patient as best you can. And these insurance adjusters, as you all know, do not like to let go of the money that the other person paid for. So, so anyway, yeah, no, he's good. Our doctors, I guess the biggest thing they always question, and we got 58% of our community out of the 3,800 is chiro physicians. The rest are integrated offices. And I would think being out 39 years, integrated with different specialties, making different opinions, have a better valuation. If they all agree on the same thing than just one specialty, I can tell you that right now. For the attorney, I know they go in with reports, MRIs, and everything else. But a lot of our attorneys that work with our doctors have been very good. Their biggest complaint is take a reduction. Take a reduction in your bill, and the attorney does not take the reduction sometimes. So, but everybody needs just to work together as your team, Mitchell, to help everybody out in these situations, because it's just a team effort all the way around for these. So I want to thank Chandon for his expertise and what he's doing in the Vegas area. And man, I got to get out there. I haven't seen it. Mirage is my place, but they're going to tear it down.
Yeah, they are.
Man, I hate to hear that, but so hopefully I'll get out there in May. So birthday time.
Yeah,
thank you,
me too.
Questions anybody want to ask? Now's your chance. I know you want to, but you're just being shy. Okay.
Not a specific question, but my goal in this region, I'm in the Riverside area in the Inland Empire, would be to try to connect with as many of the law firms as I can. And so I guess, are there any suggestions, Chandon? Do you have any suggestions for me as far as reaching the appropriate firms?
Well, how would I say, sometimes some of the smaller firms are easier to work for and more open and receptive to, people having different ideas or perspectives. So I would focus on some of the smaller firms
Okay.
that do PI, and especially practitioners that have mixed practices. So that really means, and to be frank, that's my practice, and I don't have enough cases to do 100% personal injury.
Right.
So I'm more receptive to different ideas or being approached than I think, the billboard guys would be, because they've got one thing that I've learned in PI practice is that you've got to have a system. Um, and that system's got to work and it's got to be efficient. Um, and so they've got their, metrics down. I'm still a little open to tweaking, I guess, and bringing, different ideas and different perspectives. So I think in terms of networking, guys with a mixed practice that may not just do sole personal injury, or smaller personal injury firms would be more receptive than, trying to get the highest volume player on board.
I forgot to mention this Chandon. I got Dr. Tony on here. Chandon does licensed defense, Doc. I didn't mention that. He specializes in that as well.
Yeah.
So you two I'll
Yeah.
exchange information.
Yeah, the question Kelly was mentioning about personal injury attorneys. I mean, a lot of our doctors, I mean, I've been out 39 years. We've got about 427 base attorneys we've worked with over the years, over and over and over again. Is that something I can ask the doctors? A lot of them have lists of attorneys that they've worked with in PI that is handling their bill. And in other words, if I tell Dr. So-and-so, hey, look, contact Mitchell's team, they can possibly upfront your accounts receivables, which includes my bill. Maybe I can get paid to the attorney. Is that something I should be looking to for more marketing, since she brought that up about bringing on PI attorneys, or any attorneys, I guess?
Yeah,
I think,
go ahead.
yeah. No, go ahead, Mitch. I'll let you do it. It's funding issues, I guess.
Yeah, let my lawyer will speak for me now. No, we do litigation finance. We don't just finance doctors. We specifically, especially the experts, not just medical experts, but these lawyers really need that, because experts they typically have to pay for out of their pockets. And we also have money for litigation expenses too. So, I mean, let's talk about the David and Goliath aspect of the legal profession, right? Somebody's injured, they don't typically go to, Cooley or Kirkland and Ellis. Those guys represent big companies on the defense side primarily. David and Goliath, and they get paid $1,500 an hour to keep it going as long as possible and basically starve you out. And on our side, we've got the poor injury victim, and he's got to go to some attorney with a heart that doesn't need to get paid up front, doesn't charge $2,000 an hour. So that's the problem. There's an inequity here. So our lawyers, like Chandon said, small lawyers or small mixed practices. When he said mixed practices, he means they do things other than personal injury. In his case, he does some criminal work and he does some licensed defense work as well. So these guys need our support. So my answer is yes, please. Whoever needs our help, especially if it's an attorney firm, we will give them all the service that they need.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Any last words, Chandon?
No.
All right. Thank you so much for attending.
Thanks for
And,
having me.
Chandon's available if anybody needs his particular expertise, which goes beyond personal injury. Tony, I was mentioning licensed defense because you're going to hear about it from time to time. Some docs just get in trouble, and you can consult with Chandon about coming in and helping them. 2 minutes on licensed defense, Chandon, can you do for me? Talk about licensed
Yeah.
defense.
What? Boy, it's a tough topic to sum up, but a lot of the physicians are getting investigations, or pharmacists. And I've done a couple administrative hearings across the board, from the real estate board to the massage therapy board. So there are a lot of different professional licenses where, a patient or a client complains and sort of opens up a can of worms for the physician or nurse or whomever. one of my biggest areas and then actually is intra-staff issues. And so, sometimes I've gotten inquiry letters that I've represented physicians for just on demeanor issues. And so they've complained about, nurses have complained about a physician in a hospital setting, that he's rude or, said X, Y, Z. And, the hospital has their own internal disciplinary process, which is presumptive disciplinary discipline for the board. So if a medical executive committee disciplines a physician in a hospital setting, that could go on the physician's permanent record. It's reportable to the National Practitioner Data Bank. It's a big deal. And so I guess what I'm saying, ultimately, some of these little issues can really turn up to be big things, and people need that representation to, sort of blunt that impact and make sure that their records stay intact and they don't get tagged with that discipline because they didn't know that hospital MAC committee would, or their discipline would be presumptive against them and now reportable. And that affects hospital privileges, it affects future employment. So some of the consequences are pretty significant. And in the other boards, obviously, they're looking more at concerns of revocation or suspension of license, which directly impact livelihood. So they're all a big deal. I've got a case right now, which is interesting, that the state is investigating a pharmacy for their ivermectin prescriptions. And I found that to be very unique because usually we're talking about controlled substances. We're not talking about things like ivermectin. And now they're trying to discipline the pharmacist for their, corresponding duty to consult with the physician and make sure the medication is being used for a medicinal purpose. And geez, it's kind of outrageous, but these things really do impact, and the state does, go and scrutinize details of what licensed professionals do. We're all subject to that.
Well, Mitchell, if you don't mind, and with Chandon's permission, I'd like to get his information for our doctors. And are you licensed in many states or just in Las Vegas, Chandon?
I'm just licensed in Nevada, but in terms of licensed defense, I can practice. There's a ABA rule that allows us to practice in any setting that's not a court setting without having to pro hoc into a case. And I can always pro hoc as well. So
Okay.
I've done a license because some of the physicians that I've represented there, I've got one guy that was licensed in 12 states. So we were all over with, dealing
Right.
with some discipline in all those different states. So I can really, on the license defense issue, I could kind of go anywhere.
Okay, great. Well,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Happy to share
Appreciate
that information.
We'll get your name out there, and if they
Yeah.
contact you, you guys can all work it out and find out how you can help them. So thanks.
Chandon,
Thanks, Mitch.
Would you say something? Would you say something about COVID? This is Lawrence.
yeah, I was just going to ask him, Chandon, I don't think we've seen any of these yet, but Lawrence was asking if we have any opinion about potential COVID cases. I'm going to mention something before you even answer. And, I understand that based on what I know, the pharmaceutical companies have a liability shield, but employers that are forcing employees to take the injection are basically not giving them a choice. I see them as potential clients to sue the company that forced the vaccine, and then the vaccine injures them if you could prove it. Anyway, those were just my initial thoughts, but I'll let you answer.
That's a tough one. I don't know, Mitch. It's such a political issue. It's really tough to say. I think from what I've seen in the courts, and it's just the actions that I've seen surrounding some of the lockdowns and corollary issues, it seems like the courts have largely supported the state action. There hasn't been a lot of shakeup on that. It started to change a little bit towards the end of the pandemic, but I'm not hopeful that it would be easy to get around the liability shield. And that works both ways. I've seen some people, I forget what article I read recently where I think it was Activision that removed the mask requirement and a lot of people walked off. And so then could they argue then if one of those employees got COVID, would, could they file a lawsuit? If one of them got COVID and died, but then, were they vaccinated? That would be an issue. There's a lot of different issues that touch on the coronavirus litigation, and that's one reason why I
Very
haven't
little of it favorable. Very little
yeah,
favorable.
I think it's tough, and
The government's still kicking
people
ass.
have strong opinions on it, right? That's another issue for a jury. You really look in a car accident, people don't really have strong opinions about car accidents, right? They're there, they'll listen to it, they'll listen to the experts, and we're talking about coronavirus and how that's traced and causation and things like that. Whether they're pro-mask or anti-mask, and those are all going to be issues, and I think most people have very strong feelings on. So I think it's a tough area.
Right. Let me jump in for a second, Lawrence, because I do a lot of work in medical malpractice. And these are mainly we're talking about medical malpractice issues. So the first thing I'll say is medical malpractice is extremely difficult for a number of reasons. Number one is you have to get a similar practitioner to testify against the supposed doctor or nurse that injured you, number one, at the hospital. Number two, if they were following what's called the standards of care, if they were doing what everyone else was doing, then they could say they followed the standard and therefore there was no intent to harm. There's this thing called informed consent, and there are risks involved with procedures, and you may be consenting. Now, you're not consenting for somebody to hurt you or kill you, but if you understand that there are certain risks that happen a lot and you consent to the procedure, they can at least make the argument that they followed procedure and your risks and what happened to you was no greater than to other people, a certain percentage of other people that a similar thing happened to. So in general, medical malpractice, I mean, Chandon and I worked some cases where we thought they looked interesting. We had a woman who went in for breast augmentation surgery. They punctured her chest. She got a pneumothorax. Immediately went by emergency to the emergency room. Could not have her surgery finished, and really risked death from this. It's a fatal, it's a potentially fatal injury. However, my best friend is a plastic surgeon, and he said it happens a lot. It's an elective procedure. She went on, voluntarily decided to have a risky surgery that wasn't necessary for her. And we just couldn't make a case out of it, even though it seemed on the surface to make a lot of sense. So, but I guess, if there's some case precedent, and Chandon, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but if somebody goes into the court and they can create some precedent where they can say A causes B, this is not the fault of the patient, it's the fault of doctors in the hospital or the medication. If there's some precedent that we can fall back on, that we could provide to the court, we can say this looks like that, therefore we're entitled. And I think until that happens, just some cases have to be tested in court, Chandon, correct?
Sure. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Well, from a physician's point of view, Mitchell and the rest, I know, you've heard cases of baby powder, Roundup, and Agent Orange. With the vaccines coming in, it's only been a year and a half. The body will take that in, and that's coming in the future to see what it might do with the particular, specific vaccines of how it will affect people. And that might be 3, 4, 5 years down the line. So we don't know it. It might not even happen. So you're going to see, if that happens, you're going to see all kinds of personal injury.
We know that the vaccines cause injuries. We know it.
Yeah.
Well,
An emergency use, go ahead.
They give the pharmacy companies immunity, so you can't.
They have immunity. It's emergency use authorization. So the
Yeah.
pharmaceutical companies are immune from liability. However, the employers are not. So I mean, just from a brain standpoint, I think to myself, if I tell you have to have a vaccine or you lose your job, you do it, you get injured. I think there's a case against the employer who forced you to do it because it's coercion to a certain degree.
Yeah. I
You
would
can at
agree.
least,
I would agree on
yeah,
that.
I can make some kind of an argument. I lost my income. I lost my, my daily quality of daily life is not the same anymore. I think a jury might be sympathetic to that. But the fact the Merck and Pfizer and Johnson and Johnson, it's interesting. You mentioned the baby powder. They have a new. My brother-in-law, Mark Kieselstein, is the top bankruptcy lawyer probably in the country, just retired. And what they do now, there was a bulletin this week on the legal side, and what they do now is they allow companies to shuttle certain parts of their intellectual property to new corporations and then declare bankruptcy. And this actually just happened with Johnson and Johnson and the talc. You're going to see it in the news. They were able to segregate the talc Johnson and Johnson baby powder into a separate corporate shell and go bankrupt just on that. And the only reason the judge allowed it is because they said they were willing to put $5 billion in a recovery fund. So the judge says, okay, I'm going to allow that. And then any other cases that come behind it, if they're not part of that, they're basically out of luck. So the courts try to support big pharma, big companies. There's an argument on the other side too. Obviously, we can't bankrupt every great American company that maybe really had no intent. I don't know that Johnson and Johnson had an intent to harm people. They've been selling baby powder for 100 years, and this is rarely new. There's been some asbestos particles have leaked into the manufacturing process, so you could make some argument there. But this is an unfortunate aspect. There's a legal side to this, which is not always simple, easy, or convenient, or honest, or fair. If I'm going all the way, so a lot of times we have to set the road. Chandon and I, we don't like to set precedents, but we don't have to. It's very hard to set a precedent. It's a lot easier if someone else has already done it. So that's a lot of what happens. So what I'd say to everybody is if you have a case, don't hesitate. We will look at all of them and try to give you a realistic projection of what we think we can do. Medical malpractice is pretty difficult overall. We do them.
Can we deal with my second question?
Yep. Oh, you're asking about remdesivir.
Yeah.
Well, remdesivir was an FDA-approved drug that probably killed more people than it saved. It's this FDA CDC drug company thing is nefarious, and remdesivir is probably a deadly medication. There were a lot of safe medicines that the hospitals just would not administer, and I wish somebody would sue them not against the vaccine manufacturer, but sue the hospital for preventing treatment. Remdesivir is a horrible drug. It's not a vaccine, so it's probably not sheltered by that particular law, but we'll see what happens. We'll keep an eye on it. It's certainly.
Well,
Yep.
a friend of mine took it and died.
So Mitchell, that particular drug was originally an experimental drug, not made in America. It was made in South Africa, if I remember correctly. And they brought it to America for FDA approval, mainly because it was an American company wanting to market it for humanitarian reasons, for lack of a more time. But I think that one was considered to be a novel drug that could potentially save lives for an illness such as Ebola, right? So when, I think they've been working on it since the late 70s. And then back in the early 2000s, there was an Ebola outbreak in South Africa where they successfully did use remdesivir on a number of people. What they left out of the news is how many people died, right? And then they brought those doctors back to America that were working with Doctors Without Borders. They had went to their that village, and then they had gotten sick. They were going to die, but they brought them back on a special airplane. And that was the drug that they never named in the news that they actually gave those doctors that eventually lived. So I think they're protected under a unique law under the FDA code. And I'd have to look up that novel law, but it is a sort of a protection that they give certain medications that could save a life in certain scenarios.
It was definitely the only FDA-approved drug for treatment long stage for chronic, what they call chronic COVID. The problem is they never treated anybody in the acute stage. There's a lot.
Right.
we could turn this into a weekend seminar, right?
Oh, for sure.
If they had a treatment that was useful and they said so, then they couldn't get the emergency use authorization for the vaccine. The only way they could use the vaccine is if they said there's nothing else that works. So they were what's the word? They had an advantageous position to reject potentially useful, not even drugs, but what's hydroxychloroquine. You guys know what quinine is, tonic
Oh,
oil
sure.
used for malaria, and hydroxychloroquine is basically a quinine derivative, right? And
It
so
is.
yeah, so that's why it makes sense to use it, because anti-malarial or antiviral, things that are less toxic just make more sense. Something's going to happen eventually. We don't know what. We'll be watching the precedent, and if that thing, if it opens up, I'm sure all of us will be very interested. We look at that stuff all the time, and as soon as we know there's an opening there, we'll just send that down the pipeline, let everybody know that things can be done for these. There's I think we're up to 2 million injury vaccines.
So, since you guys brought up sort of the employment aspect of vaccination as a condition of employment,
Yeah.
isn't that considered, if it's written in their laws and bylaws in a corporation, wouldn't that be considered just to be exactly what it is, a condition of employment? We don't want you employed here if you are this or not that.
Well, but you can't have a condition of employment that somebody chops their arm off, or commits a crime. So things that are injurious to people don't hold up. You can't agree to be injured. You can't agree to break a law. Those things they're not things that you can do that
So
are.
now I agree with that, right? And you consider I've worked in the healthcare industry for a very long time, where they've forced vaccination on us every year. So I understand the need for certain businesses to require a vaccination for certain people. I think with this, though, it is going to turn into just what I said. You chose to be employed here. You signed a document that said you would get vaccinated. And I believe most companies have been legally savvy enough to include in that document a little bit of language that says that they're not liable for any injuries. So you have to really be careful and read what you sign, even when you're signing it for your employment or for your paycheck. I worked for a company once that paid large commission checks, but every time you accepted that commission check, you signed a brand new 2-year no compete agreement with that company. So if you ever left, you just signed a 2-year agreement.
Right, but they're challenged, and these are things you could challenge that. Even if we'll have to see what happens on the court level.
Sure.
Lawrence was bringing up that it's not actually a vaccine. That's true, but we'll leave that semantics part out of it for the second. That it's a gene therapy. We're well aware. mRNA.
Yeah, but they changed the legal definition of a vaccine at the NIH, the CDC, the WHO, and the FDA. So it is considered a vaccine now.
Here's the thing about the law and the courts, right? They're going to do what they're going to do, and if they have to change the law,
you're gonna love this.
Yeah, the thing is that they're going to, and in some places where, you find specific courts that are sympathetic to this, you find judges that this is a personal issue for.
I said it's not a vaccine.
Right? No, we know that. Yeah, but if you find courts that are or juries that are sympathetic to this, that can create a precedent, then you can use that. And until then, so like what's written isn't necessarily, that's not the deciding factor. People argue against non-competes all the time. But certainly,
Sure.
Here's the issue I think that's going to come up,
Please.
and it's going to be very hard for the employers to have the employers are going to say if they didn't require the vaccine, then they're putting their employees at risk of harm.
Correct.
And so they're going to argue this, hey, we're damned if we don't do and damned if we don't. And we went with the science and with the experts and with saying that this vaccine was safe. And unless they had, Mitch talked about the talcum issue, but, I think that Johnson & Johnson had some notice about some of those issues and chose to ignore it, much like big tobacco and harm. These companies don't have any advance notice that, and in fact, it's quite the opposite, that there's any risk of harm coming from the vaccine. And so I honestly would not see any liability at all, because I think they're going to argue that, they're protecting their employees ultimately. And there was nothing, within the law, an injury has to be foreseeable, right? And there's no foreseeability here. The vaccines were deemed safe. They were FDA approved. All the experts touted them. They basically said, I'm not aware that the government's actually admitted that there's any side effects. Not that I agree with that, but
I don't think
I think that's a great point.
I don't think they were FDA approved. And now that all the Pfizer documents are coming out, they knew they weren't.
It's authorized still,
yeah, they
not
were FDA
approved.
It's
Right.
EU
Well,
based. So.
No, I remember Biden when he took office. I think over the summer they were.
Yeah,
filing-
here's what you may not know about that though. If you look up the actual FDA document that lists the approval, they list an approval for a drug that's not yet been manufactured.
Commodity.
All the stockpile drugs that are still going out is a bio-NT long number medication, and that's still under EUA.
But in terms of liability, though, an employer doesn't have a duty to investigate that far. And it's not that I agree with any of this, but I just don't see the employer being on the hook for liability, because there's no foreseeability that these viruses caused harm. There was nothing to indicate that. So they're putting people at an unreasonable risk of harm. In fact, they're going to argue that, hey, look, we were trying to keep our workplace safe, and they do have an obligation to do that. So I think a judge is going to be fairly moved by hey, we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. So we did what we thought was best and for the safety of our employees, which align with the experts.
I think that's the reality there too, as well.
I think we're going to wrap it up here, guys. I know Dr. Tony's got to take off. He's kind enough to stay a little bit longer. Chandon, same. I know people are getting busy, starting to get these little texts here. Thank you, everybody. We're going to, once a week, we're going to have a little powwow. We're going to bring in multiple experts, and hopefully this is helpful to the people that are here and the people that we share this with. I want to thank you all for coming. I look forward to meeting with each and every one of you as time permits. Thanks, Chandon, Kelly, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.